The sleek obsidian ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls gleaming with alien metals that seemed to absorb light itself. Admiral Sarah Chun watched from the command center of Luna Base as the formation of 12 vessels settled into perfect formation above major population centers. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, their organic curves suggesting they had been grown rather than built. "Ma'am, they're broadcasting on all frequencies," Communications Officer Martinez reported, his voice tight with tension. "Universal Translator is working, but the message is unusual." Chen nodded grimly. First contact protocols had been drilled into every officer, but nothing had prepared them for this scenario. "Put it through." The voice that filled the command center was melodious yet cold, speaking with the casual arrogance of absolute superiority. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. We are the Kethmori, elite hunters of the Galactic Consortium. Your species has been selected for the Great Hunt, a privilege reserved for the most promising prey worlds. You should feel honored." Chen's jaw clenched. The alien spoke as if they were announcing a sporting event rather than what sounded like genocide. The voice continued. "As per Consortium law, you are permitted to choose champions to represent your species in trial combat. Select your finest warriors, your most skilled hunters, your deadliest soldiers. Send them to the coordinates we will provide. If they can defeat our hunting party in fair combat, your world will be granted protected status and membership in the consortium. If they fail," the transmission paused, letting the implication hang in the air, "well, the hunt will commence in earnest." The communication cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Chen's mind raced through possibilities. Earth's military was advanced by their own standards, but these ships had technology decades ahead of anything humanity possessed. Their best special forces, their most elite soldiers, would be walking into a slaughter. "Give me a direct line to every major military power on Earth," she ordered, "and patch me through to the Global Defense Council. We need our absolute best for this." Over the next 6 hours, the world's greatest warriors were assembled. Navy SEALs, British SS, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli Sayeret Matkal, and a dozen other elite units sent their finest operators. These were men and women who had survived impossible odds, who had been forged in the crucible of the world's deadliest conflicts. But as Chen reviewed the dossiers, a sick feeling grew in her stomach. These soldiers were trained to fight humans, not aliens with unknown capabilities and technology far beyond Earth's understanding. They were sending lambs to the slaughter. That's when Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison approached her with an unusual proposal. "Ma'am, there's someone you need to consider," Morrison said, sliding a tablet across her desk. "I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out." Chen looked at the file, and her eyebrows shot up. "A 17-year-old? Morrison, have you lost your mind?" "Marcus Kane," Morrison continued, ignoring her incredulous tone. "He's not military, but his record in survival competitions and hunting tournaments is unprecedented. The kid has taken down apex predators with improvised weapons, survived in environments that killed seasoned outdoorsmen, and has reflexes that would make our best snipers jealous." Chun scrolled through the file, her frown deepening. "He's a child, Morrison. A gifted one, perhaps, but we can't send a teenager to face alien hunters. With respect, ma'am, we're not sending anyone to fight soldiers. We're sending them to face hunters. And Marcus Kane is the best hunter I've ever seen." Morrison leaned forward. He grew up in the Alaskan wilderness, raised by a grandfather who was Inuit. The boy learned to track and hunt before he could properly read. He survived 3 weeks in the Arctic with nothing but a knife. He once killed a grizzly bear that attacked his camp using only a sharpened stick and his bare hands. Chin studied the boy's photograph. Marcus Kane had intense green eyes and a lean build that spoke of someone accustomed to hardship. His face held a maturity that seemed far older than his 17 years. "The alien said they want our finest hunters," Morrison pressed. "Everyone else we're sending is a warrior trained to fight other humans. Marcus Kane was born to hunt. It's not just what he does, it's what he is." Chen closed the file and stared out at the alien ships hanging in Earth's sky like dark omens. Every instinct told her this was madness. But perhaps madness was exactly what they needed. "Get him here," she said quietly. "But Morrison, if this goes wrong, it's on both of us." As orders were transmitted across the globe, none of them knew that Marcus Kane was already preparing. In a remote cabin in Alaska, the teenager had been watching the news coverage with growing excitement rather than fear. Finally, prey worthy of the hunt had come to him. Marcus Kane arrived at Luna Base 3 hours later aboard a military transport. His only possessions a worn leather backpack and a simple hunting knife that had belonged to his grandfather. The knife was nothing special to look at, just carbon steel with a bone handle wrapped in leather, but it had never failed him. Admiral Chun met him personally at the airlock, still struggling to believe she was about to send a teenager to represent humanity's survival. Up close, Marcus was smaller than she'd expected, barely 5'8", with the wiry build of someone who had spent their life in constant motion. But his eyes held a predatory intelligence that made her unconsciously step back. "Sir, thank you for this opportunity," Marcus said, his voice carrying a slight Alaskan accent. "When do I meet the others?" Chun blinked. The boy was treating this like he'd been selected for a sports team, rather than a mission that would likely end in his death. "Marcus, you understand what we're asking of you? These aren't human opponents. They're alien hunters with technology we can't comprehend." Marcus tilted his head slightly, considering this. "My grandfather used to say that all predators think the same way, whether they're wolves, bears, or men. They all have the same weaknesses, too." He paused, then added with unsettling calm, "I've never hunted aliens before. Should be interesting." The briefing room was filled with the world's deadliest soldiers when Marcus walked in. 32 elite operators from every major military force, each one a veteran of countless battles. They looked at the teenager with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. "This is a joke, right?" growled Sergeant Major Thompson, a British CS operative with scars covering half his face. "They want us to babysit some Boy Scout." Marcus ignored the comment and took a seat at the back, studying each soldier with the same intensity he might examine tracks in the snow. These men and women were impressive physical specimens, clearly well-trained and experienced. But they carried themselves like soldiers, not hunters. They thought in terms of tactics and formations, not in terms of reading the landscape and understanding their prey. Colonel Morrison began the briefing, displaying holographic projections of the hunt zone the aliens had designated. It was a 500-square-kilometer area of dense forest and mountainous terrain in Montana, chosen specifically for its challenging environment. Intelligence suggests the Keth Mori hunting party consists of 5 individuals, Morrison explained. They've provided no information about their capabilities or weapons, but scan data indicates they're roughly humanoid. The rules are simple. Last team standing wins. No outside assistance. No extraction until the hunt is concluded. Captain Yuki Tanaka of the Japanese Special Forces raised her hand. "What about equipment restrictions?" "Surprisingly few," Morrison replied. "We can bring standard military gear, but nothing nuclear, biological, or chemical. Conventional weapons and equipment only." Marcus finally spoke up. "What about the terrain? Vegetation, wildlife, water sources?" The room turned to look at him. Morrison pulled up detailed topographical maps. Dense pine forest, several river systems, mountainous with caves and ravines. Local wildlife includes bears, wolves, elk, various smaller predators. Marcus nodded, already visualizing the hunting ground. While the soldiers were thinking about sight lines and defensive positions, he was considering animal trails, water sources, and how the forest would react to alien intruders. The preparation phase lasted 18 hours. The soldiers assembled an impressive array of weapons and gear: assault rifles, sniper rifles, grenades, night vision equipment, tactical armor, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. They planned coordinated attacks, established communication protocols, and assigned specific roles to each team member. Marcus prepared differently. He traded his civilian clothes for simple woodland camouflage, selected a basic military backpack, and added only a few items: a compact bow with a quiver of arrows, a set of snares, a water purification kit, and some basic medical supplies. When offered advanced weapons, he politely declined everything except a combat knife to supplement his grandfather's blade. "Kid, you're going to get yourself killed with that Boy Scout setup," warned Captain Rodriguez of the U.S. Marines. "Take at least a sidearm." "Guns are loud," Marcus replied simply. "They tell everyone where you are." The soldiers looked at him like he'd grown a second head. In their world, superior firepower was everything. But Marcus was thinking about a different kind of warfare entirely. The transport to the hunting ground was tense. The elite soldiers reviewed their plans, checked their equipment, and tried to ignore the knot of dread in their stomachs. They were warriors, but they'd never faced anything like this. Marcus sat quietly by himself, eyes closed, mentally preparing for the hunt. He wasn't thinking about the aliens as enemies to be defeated, but as prey to be understood. What did they eat? How did they move through unfamiliar terrain? What would their hunting patterns reveal about their psychology? When the transport touched down at the edge of the designated zone, the soldiers deployed in perfect formation, weapons ready, communications active. They moved like the professional military unit they were. Marcus simply melted into the forest, becoming one with the shadows between the trees. Within minutes, he had vanished completely, leaving no trace of his passage. The soldiers continued their advance, unaware that they were already being watched. High in the canopy above, shapes moved with impossible silence, studying the loud, heavily armed humans with predatory interest. The hunt had begun, but none of the human soldiers realized they had already become the prey. Only Marcus, somewhere deep in the woods, smiled grimly as he detected the first signs of alien movement. The real question wasn't whether humanity's champions could survive the hunt. The question was whether the Kethmori hunters were prepared for what they had awakened in the wilderness. The first human died 6 hours into the hunt. Captain Martinez of the Spanish Special Operations never saw what killed him. His squad was moving through a dense thicket when his radio simply went silent. When they doubled back, they found only a few drops of strange, silvery blood on the leaves, and his weapon lying abandoned. "Contact lost with Alpha 7, reported Sergeant Major Thompson through the comm network. "Martinez is gone. No body, no trace." Marcus Kane heard the transmission from his position 2 kilometers away, crouched beside a stream where he'd been studying tracks. The aliens had been here recently, their passage marked by subtle signs that spoke volumes to someone who knew how to read them. The Kethmori moved differently than any predator he'd encountered. Their steps were too precise, too calculated. They didn't disturb vegetation the way a natural hunter would, but they left other signs. A faint chemical scent that lingered in the air, electromagnetic disturbances that made his compass needle twitch, and an almost imperceptible humming that seemed to come from their equipment. Most importantly, they were studying their prey before striking. These weren't mindless killers, but intelligent hunters who took time to understand their quarry. That meant they could be understood in return. Marcus began following the trail, moving with the silent patience his grandfather had taught him. The Kethmori had passed this way, heading northwest toward higher ground, probably seeking a vantage point to observe the human forces below. Meanwhile, the remaining soldiers were adapting to a nightmare scenario. These weren't the stand-up fights they trained for. The aliens struck from impossible angles, used technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics, and disappeared before any effective counterattack could be mounted. Lieutenant Sarah Kim watched 2 more members of her squad vanish in the space of an hour. The aliens seemed to phase in and out of visibility, their forms shimmering like heat mirages. When they attacked, it was with weapons that fired bolts of coherent energy, cutting through military-grade armor like it was paper. "We need to regroup," she radioed to the remaining teams. "Whatever we're facing, standard tactics aren't working." But regrouping was exactly what the Kethmori wanted. As the human forces consolidated into a defensive formation in a mountain clearing, They found themselves surrounded by enemies they couldn't see and barely understood. The attack came at sunset. Energy bolts rained down from multiple directions, and more soldiers fell in the opening volley. The survivors returned fire, their bullets seeming to pass through empty air where muzzle flashes suggested alien positions. That's when Marcus made his move. While the pitched battle raged in the clearing below, he had used the distraction to approach the Kethmori position from an unexpected angle. He'd spent hours studying their movement patterns, and he'd noticed something the other humans had missed: the aliens' cast shadows. Their cloaking technology could bend light around them, but it couldn't eliminate the physical reality of their bodies blocking ambient light sources. To someone who had spent years tracking prey through dense forest, those fleeting shadows were as clear as footprints in snow. Marcus had positioned himself upwind from the aliens, using the natural airflow to mask his scent. He'd also noticed that the humming sound from their equipment became more pronounced when they were preparing to fire, giving him a split-second warning of their locations. The first Kethmori hunter never saw death coming. Marcus's arrow took it through what appeared to be empty air, but the shaft suddenly protruded from something solid. The alien's cloaking field flickered and failed, revealing a tall, insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the dying sunlight. The creature collapsed with a gurgling cry, bright blue blood pooling beneath its body. Its death scream caused the other aliens to pause their attack, suddenly aware that they were no longer the only predators in the forest. Marcus was already moving, flowing through the undergrowth like smoke. The Kethmori began searching for him, their thermal sensors and motion detectors sweeping the area. But thermal sensors couldn't detect someone who had learned to control their body temperature through Inuit meditation techniques, and motion detectors were useless against prey that moved only when the wind moved the branches around him. The second alien fell 10 minutes later, Marcus's grandfather's knife sliding between the plates of its armor with surgical precision. He'd approached from directly below, using a technique his grandfather had called hunting like water, flowing around obstacles until he found the path of least resistance. By now, the remaining Kethmori were beginning to panic. These weren't supposed to be effective prey. Humans were supposed to be loud, clumsy, emotional creatures who could be herded and hunted like cattle. But something was stalking them through their own hunting ground, picking them off one by one with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their defenses. The alien commander, a Kethmori veteran of dozens of successful hunts, activated its emergency beacon. "Ship leader, we have an anomaly. One of the prey is displaying unprecedented hunting capability. Request immediate extraction." The response was swift and cold. "Negative. Complete the hunt or die with honor." "Ship leader out." The commander looked at its 2 remaining hunters, both of whom were visibly shaken. In their long careers as the galaxy's most feared predators, they had never encountered prey that fought back so effectively. But Marcus wasn't done. He'd been studying the aliens' behavior patterns, and he'd noticed something crucial. They communicated through their equipment using directed energy bursts. That meant their communications could be tracked and, more importantly, jammed, using techniques his grandfather had taught him for calling game animals. Marcus began producing subsonic vocalizations that interfered with the Kethmori communication frequency. Within minutes, the remaining aliens had lost contact with each other, separated, confused, and facing an enemy they couldn't understand. The galaxy's most elite hunters found themselves experiencing something completely alien to their psychology: fear. In the clearing below, the surviving human soldiers heard the alien death cries and realized something had changed. The energy weapon fire had stopped, and there were sounds of struggle coming from the forest around them. "What the hell is happening out there?" whispered Sergeant Major Thompson. Lieutenant Kim checked her remaining ammunition and tried to raise Marcus on the radio. Static answered her, but somehow she knew the teenager was still alive. More than alive. He was doing something no one had thought possible. He was turning the hunt around. The third Kethmori hunter died at dawn, caught in a snare made from braided parachute cord while fleeing through what it thought was safe passage between two ridges. Marcus had predicted its escape route by studying how the aliens moved through terrain, noting their preference for paths that offered multiple exit strategies. But this kill was different. As the alien thrashed in the snare, Marcus approached and looked into its compound eyes. For the first time, he spoke to one of his prey. "You hunt for sport," he said quietly, crouching beside the dying creature. "My people hunt to survive. There's a difference." The Kethmori tried to speak, its translator creating broken human words. "You are not what we expected." Marcus nodded. "That's your mistake. You studied our soldiers, our weapons, our cities. You never studied our hunters." He paused, then added, "My grandfather taught me that every creature has a right to die with dignity, even predators." He ended the alien's suffering quickly and efficiently, then took its weapon and communication device. The weapon was fascinating, a crystalline structure that seemed to focus energy through biological components. But it was the communication device that interested him more. Using techniques his grandfather had taught him for understanding animal calls, Marcus began deciphering the Kethmori communication patterns. The aliens used a complex system that combined electromagnetic pulses with pheromone releases and subtle sound frequencies. It took him 3 hours, but eventually he managed to intercept a transmission between the last hunter and the ship overhead. "Hunter Prime to ship leader." The transmission crackled through the alien device. "All other hunters are eliminated. The prey exhibits capabilities far beyond intelligence estimates, requesting immediate extraction." "Negative," came the cold response. "The hunt continues until completion or your death." These are the terms the prey accepted. Marcus smiled grimly. The aliens were bound by their own rules, just like any predator, and that gave him leverage. The last Kethmori hunter was the most dangerous. It was the pack leader, more experienced and better equipped than the others. When Marcus finally located it, the alien had taken a defensive position in a cave system, using its superior technology to turn the location into a fortress. Energy barriers flickered across the cave mouth, and automated defense systems tracked any movement in the surrounding area. The hunter had also deployed sensor nets throughout the approaches, making a stealthy advance impossible. But Marcus wasn't thinking like a soldier trying to assault a position. He was thinking like a hunter who had just found prey that had gone to ground. He spent the entire day studying the cave system, not looking for ways to attack, but for ways to understand his quarry. The Kethmori needed atmospheres similar to Earth's to survive, but their equipment suggested they required higher humidity levels. The cave they'd chosen was near an underground water source, which meant they were dealing with the same basic survival needs as any Earth predator. As night fell, Marcus put his plan into action. Using knowledge gained from years of survival training in Alaska, he began redirecting the underground stream that fed into the cave system. It was exhausting work, moving rocks and digging channels by hand, but by midnight he had created something devastating, a flash flood. The water hit the cave system with the force of nature itself, shorting out the aliens' defensive systems and forcing the Kethmori hunter to evacuate to higher ground. That's where Marcus was waiting. The fight that followed was brief, but vicious. The alien had superior strength and technology, but Marcus had something else: absolute understanding of his environment and enemy. He used the terrain like a weapon, leading the hunter across loose rock that shifted under its heavier weight, through thorny undergrowth that caught on its equipment, over slippery surfaces that challenged its alien balance. When the Kethmori finally fell, struck by a perfectly placed arrow while struggling through a patch of dense brush, it looked up at the human teenager with something resembling respect. "You hunt, like us," it gasped through its translator. Marcus knelt beside the dying alien. "No, I hunt better than you." He paused, then added more gently, "But you died well. That counts for something." With the last hunter dead, Marcus activated the alien communication device and sent a message to the ship overhead. "This is Marcus Kane of Earth. Your hunting party is eliminated. According to your own laws, This planet is now under protected status. The response came quickly. Impossible. You are merely prey. Marcus looked up at the alien ships hanging in the dawn sky. Come down and test that theory. There was a long silence. Then, we will retrieve our dead and depart. Your world will receive protected status, but you, young hunter, have caught our attention. The consortium will remember you. Good, Marcus replied. Remember this too. Earth isn't your prey. It's our hunting ground. And we've been the apex predators here for a very long time. The alien ships began their departure procedures, but Marcus knew this wasn't really an ending. It was a beginning. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was capable of producing hunters who could challenge their best, and that knowledge would spread. As he made his way back to the rendezvous point where the surviving human soldiers waited, Marcus reflected on what his grandfather had always told him. The most dangerous prey is the kind that hunts back. The old man would have been proud. Behind him, the bodies of 5 Kethmori elite hunters lay scattered through the Montana wilderness, testament to what happened when the galaxy's most feared predators encountered something they hadn't expected, a human who understood that sometimes the prey needs to become the hunter. But as the alien ships disappeared into the void, Marcus felt a stirring of anticipation. The consortium had noticed him, and that meant bigger challenges were coming. He found himself looking forward to it. 6 months later, Marcus Kane stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran Defense Station, watching as alien ships from dozens of different species docked at the massive orbital platform. Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a prey world that had earned respect through violence. Admiral Chen approached him, carrying a data pad filled with reports from across the galaxy. You've started something, she said, joining him at the viewing port. Intelligence reports are coming in from everywhere. Prey species that have been hunted for generations are starting to fight back. Some are even winning. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. Predators get lazy when prey doesn't fight back. We reminded the galaxy that prey can have teeth. The data pad showed footage from a dozen worlds where the consortium's hunting parties have been defeated or driven off by species they'd previously considered helpless. The Orth Key of Kepler 442b had used their natural camouflage abilities to eliminate an entire Kethmori expedition. The crystalline beings of Ross 128b had turned their silicon-based biology into living weapons. The aquatic Nultai had demonstrated that underwater environments gave them advantages even advanced technology couldn't overcome. The consortium is furious, Chen continued. They're calling you a contamination event and demanding that Earth hand you over for trial. Marcus smiled coldly. What did you tell them? I told them to come and take you, Chen replied. Surprisingly, they declined. That wasn't surprising to Marcus at all. Word had spread through the galactic underworld about the human who had killed 5 elite hunters using primitive weapons. The consortium's reputation was built on fear and overwhelming superiority. Having that reputation challenged by a teenager with a bow and arrow was worse than any military defeat. But Marcus knew the real changes were just beginning. The communication device he'd taken from the last Kethmori hunter had provided Earth scientists with unprecedented access to galactic information networks. What they'd learned was staggering. The consortium wasn't a government or military force. It was essentially a galaxy-wide protection racket run by predator species who had convinced everyone else that resistance was futile. They offered protection from themselves in exchange for tribute, territory, and hunting rights. It was a system that had kept the galaxy stable for 10,000 years by ensuring that prey species never developed the capability or confidence to fight back. Marcus had broken that system in a single day. There's something else, Chun said, activating a holographic display. We've been contacted by something called the Prey Alliance. Apparently, it's a secret coalition of species that have been planning resistance for centuries. They want to meet with you. The hologram showed representatives from dozens of species Marcus had never seen before. Graceful beings that looked like living crystal formations, hulking creatures that resembled intelligent bears, tiny winged beings that moved in perfect swarms, and others that defied easy description. They're calling you the Apex Awakener, Chen added. Apparently, that translates to something like the one who teaches prey to hunt. Marcus studied the diverse collection of beings, noting how each species had evolved different advantages that could be turned into weapons given the right circumstances. The galaxy was full of potential hunters who had simply been convinced they were prey. When's the meeting? He asked. Tomorrow. But, Marcus, you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about Earth anymore. You start a revolution that could reshape the entire galactic order. The consortium won't take that lying down. Marcus turned away from the viewing port, his expression thoughtful. My grandfather used to say that the biggest predators are the ones that have forgotten they can be prey. The consortium has ruled through fear for so long. They've forgotten that scared prey is dangerous prey. He paused, then added, they're about to get a reminder. The next day, the meeting convened in the station's largest conference room. Representatives from 43 different species attended, either in person or via quantum communication links. Some were small and delicate, others massive and powerful, but all shared one thing in common. They'd been prey for so long that they'd almost forgotten they could be anything else. Marcus addressed them in simple terms, speaking through translators that converted his words into dozens of different languages and communication methods. You didn't invite me here to ask if you should fight back, he began. You already know you should. You invited me here to ask if you can win. The assembled representatives leaned forward, hanging on his words. The answer is yes, but not the way you're thinking. You can't beat the consortium by becoming like them. You beat them by being something they can't understand or predict. They're hunters, so they think like hunters. That makes them predictable. He activated a holographic display showing tactical analysis of consortium hunting patterns. They follow the same basic strategies because those strategies have worked for thousands of years. They study their prey, choose favorable terrain, use superior technology to establish dominance, then eliminate resistance systematically. It's efficient, but it's also rigid. Marcus pointed to specific data points. But they've never faced prey that studies them back. They've never dealt with enemies who use their environment as a weapon. They've never fought opponents who understand that sometimes the best way to win a hunt is to become the thing doing the hunting. Over the following hours, Marcus outlined a strategy that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Instead of direct military confrontation, the Prey Alliance would use their diverse abilities to turn the consortium's hunting practices against them. Aquatic species would lure hunters into underwater death traps. Crystalline beings would create environments where energy weapons became useless. Hive mind species would overwhelm individual hunters with coordinated attacks that exploited gaps in their psychology. The most important thing, Marcus concluded, is that you stop thinking like prey. Prey runs, hides, and hopes to survive. Hunters study, plan, and execute. The moment you start thinking like hunters, you become something the consortium can't defeat. As the meeting concluded and the alien representatives began planning their coordinated resistance, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction. This was what his grandfather had trained him for, even if neither of them had realized it at the time. Not just to hunt, but to teach others how to reclaim their place as predators in their own environments. The galaxy was about to discover that the age of the consortium was ending, and the age of the awakened prey had begun. And at the center of it all was a teenager from Alaska who had learned that the most dangerous hunt wasn't about killing your prey. It was about teaching your prey to kill back.